Well, you see them all around Champaign-Urbana, especially if you find yourself driving on campus. We're talking about e-scooters. And now there's new research from the U of I shining a light on some pros and cons of this rideshare option. So we have one of the authors of the study joining me today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me. I'm excited to talk about this research.
Yeah, and I know e-scooters are something all drivers can relate to. Tell me a little bit about why you chose to study this in particular.
Yeah, so I study how technologies impact firms and consumers. I'm a marketing faculty at the Geese College of Business, and I found e-scooters fascinating. They're cool looking, they're lightweight, they give more access to mobility options. And so I was curious about how would they affect consumers, not just in terms of their economic spending, going out to restaurants and retail, which are typical things we study in marketing. I wanted to see how would they affect consumers' mobility as well as their safety and well-being.
What did you learn? What are some of those effects that you discovered during this?
Yeah, so I would highlight three key effects. First, I found that there's an increase in rideshare usage once e-scooters are introduced. And this is all based on data from Chicago in 2019. And then I also found that bike share actually reduces. So you would think that e-scooters being micromobility would also boost bike share as a category, but we find the opposite. There's a substitution of bike share. And finally, there's an increase in crime, particularly those that are related to street and vehicle-related crimes. So not violence, not homicide. I want to caveat that finding for our listeners. And it's mostly coming from street-based crimes that are opportunistic in nature.
So is that like people are stealing the scooters, or what does that look like, that increase in crime?
Yeah, so thankfully the Chicago government data does have some details on what type of crimes are going up as a result of these e-scooters. So we see things like breaking into a vehicle or a snatch and run type of crime, which makes e-scooters a way for easy escape. So those are the crimes that we see going up by almost 19%.
So what does that mean maybe impact-wise for cities who maybe have these e-scooters, e-bikes readily available?
Yeah, I think in my knowledge, first of all, I tend to be an optimist when it comes to new technology. But in my knowledge, this is some of the early pains we are seeing with transitions happening as these technologies are just breaking in. So for cities, it means being aware, first of all, of those costs that could potentially be a side effect of e-scooters, but also then thinking about policy and regulation and how they can improve on these aspects.
Now, another thing I read in your research has to do with the environment. People probably think, oh, e-scooters are really helping the environment, but you learned maybe not necessarily the case. Expand a bit on that.
Exactly. So that finding comes from two things. One is we see rideshare go up. So we see that people are making trips that they wouldn't have made otherwise at all. So they're going out more. And particularly when we look at over 8 million rideshare trips and connect them back to the e-scooter pickup and drop-off points, we see that these are the trips that they just wouldn't have made. So for example, going out to eat, they take e-scooter one way and maybe they're late night and there's no e-scooter option to come back. So they take the rideshare on the way back, which is adding to these carbon emissions because those trips would have just not happened. And the second aspect of it is bike share reduces, which would have been an environmentally friendly option to begin with. So combining these two effects, we actually in the paper show all our heavy lifting and calculations to show 800 metric ton more carbon emissions as a result of these two combined effects. Again, with the caveat that we don't really have car ownership data.
And I feel like that may surprise people. So thank you so much for sharing some of this knowledge. Who would have thought, that e-scooters and studying them would make such a big impact? So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
We will have this interview and more linked over on our website, WCIA.com.